All right, hello everybody. Once again, it is time for another Advocacy with Adam here with the Alaska Airmen's Association. I, of course, am Adam White, and it is March 2025, and I'm looking here at my notes, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and just jump right in and get to it here. I've been traveling an awful lot since January. Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks. Been to Juneau, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Was down in the Seattle area and was not able to do everything I wanted to there. We'll talk about that. And been down back and forth to Anchorage quite a bit for meetings and things. So, most of you know this already, but I work remote here in Nenana. I've been working remote since long before COVID, and so there's a lot of travel that's involved to be able to go around and advocate for you and your membership here in the Alaska Airmen's Association. So I want to follow up on some things I asked about last month and thank the folks that reached out to me about more weather information, more weather stations, and I appreciate that feedback. I got a pretty good list of some potential candidates to be able to tell the FAA. I will say that process has stalled just a little bit within the FAA because of the transition and the FAA not being able to engage with industry when it comes to policy matters, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. So thank you for those that have reached out about some potential weather reporting stations that we'd like to see that we currently don't have, or maybe a weather station that's been down for a while and you can't access the data. Got a couple of those that came in as well, so I've added those to the list. So thank you once again for that. Speaking of not engaging with industry, there were several articles in the media about the issue of the FAA kind of on a pause or a little bit of a break, engaging with industry when it came to policy matters. I will say that the FAA has not pulled away from being able to talk about safety issues, and they've been very active in attending safety meetings and working safety policy type things along the way without crossing that line when it comes to the policy, pause is probably the best way to put it. And again, as I've mentioned previously, this is not an unusual thing. What is a little bit unusual is the length that this has gone on. Obama did this when he took office. George W. Bush did the same thing when he took office. Clinton did this when he took office. And Ronald Reagan did this when he took office, and I probably have missed a couple of other presidents along the way that have done this very same thing. Basically, they come into office and they say, you know what, we need to know what's going on. We need to understand what's happening. We need to review and make sure that we're in agreement with what's going on. And so until we're comfortable with that, we're just going to ask you to pause. And so that's what's happened. Now, there's been some other things that have happened in line with that, and depending on your take on some of the politics as to how you feel about some of those things, there have been a lot of folks that were dismissed from their positions, especially the probationary employees. There's been some challenges to that in the legal system, and it looks like some of those folks are coming back to work. Now, all along, I kind of anticipated that folks that had been laid off and not actually dismissed, the folks that were laid off, they were going to come back eventually after things kind of got figured out. But the folks that were dismissed, there was no guarantee or possibility that they were going to get their jobs back unless there was legal action. And it seems that there has been from the unions. And so I haven't heard any specific numbers for us here within the FAA in Alaska, but my assumption is some of those folks are probably coming back to work soon. Now, the other thing that happened, which you probably are familiar with, is what the quote fork in the road email that went out to a lot of folks that were senior management, upper level folks that were close to retirement, relatively close to retirement. And it was basically a buyout proposal for them. There have been several people that I know within the FAA that have taken that fork in the road. One of those being the regional administrator, Michael O'Hare. And so while I don't fault him at all for taking an early retirement, congratulations to him for that. He does leave a pretty big hole in the regional administrator's position here for the state of Alaska, and we'll see how that gets filled. So along that same line, with that position now being open, the acting regional administrator is Kevin Hubbard, who was the deputy regional administrator. That's a temporary post until the FAA can figure out how they're going to permanently fill that position. We've worked with Kevin for many years and appreciate his cooperation and partnership when it comes to understanding and working safety issues for us here in Alaska. So the other part of that process is the FAA will rotate people through those positions to give them experience, temporary experience, obviously, as an acting position, to get them executive experience within the organization. And on a normal cycle, it could take up to a year before they find somebody permanent to put in that position. What I'm hearing is that we could be up to 2 years before we would have a permanent replacement for the regional administrator for the FAA here in Alaska. And you say, well, what's the big deal with that, Adam? Here's the big deal. This is why this particular rotation is going to be important for us, because the Don Young Alaska Safety Initiative, which used to be called the FAA Alaska Safety Initiative, but acronyms change in DC about as often as people change their socks. So the Don Young Alaska Safety Initiative is a program that is actually going to bring in $25 million a year for the next 5 years here into Alaska for safety enhancements. And we're not exactly sure what that means yet. We've all got some ideas what that means, but how does that actually be implemented? We're not sure. The reason why we're somewhat unsure is because the regional administrator's office is charged with heading up that program. Now, there's a lot of people that are in that project that are not changing. Actually, they've brought on a contractor to be able to work that issue specifically. So we've got hope that things aren't going to stop or slow down. We just want to make sure, and I say we, meaning industry, myself specifically, AOPA, the Alaska Aviation Safety Foundation, RAF, just to name a few of the folks that have kind of expressed some concern, along with the Alaska Air Carriers Association for sure, about we don't want to lose any ground. We don't want to lose any time. We want to make sure that we're able to get this done on target, in timeline, and be able to not lose that $25 million for safety enhancements. Now, some of that safety enhancement could possibly be weather stations. That's why the FAA was asking for a list from us, what we thought we wanted. Other things that could improve is ADS-B data, with being able to get that data into the cockpit, but you need a ground-based transceiver to be able to do that. And so there's a possibility of maybe some more GBTs for ADS-B, speaking of acronyms. So there's all kinds of things that could be done to enhance safety with that money. But then we just had a continuing resolution passed by Congress, and so that means that we don't have a new budget for this fiscal year. We're actually working off of the previous budget with a few modifications. And what does that mean for that $25 million? It may be written into the FAA reauthorization bill, but it is not gone through the budget process, and that money has not been allocated, and it is not there. And when will it show up? It's anybody's guess. So other impacts of a continuing resolution, the construction season for this year, most of the airport improvement program funds have already been committed and will be there for the 2025 construction season. So I'm told by state DOT. There's a few projects that may actually slip because of that continuing resolution. So we'll keep a close eye on that for you, because we all know how construction seasons are short here. And when the money is slow in coming, projects get put on hold, and sometimes you just miss the entire season. So something else that was very exciting and encouraging to see is the Alaska Air Carriers Association recently had their annual convention in Anchorage. I was able to attend that, and a great opportunity to visit with longtime friends and be able to talk about issues and policy from an industry perspective, even though the FAA really couldn't engage in those types of conversations. The FAA was present for a lot of the event. One of the things that did happen that was really positive is that the EAGLE initiative, which is EAGLE, again, another acronym, Eliminate Aviation Gas Lead Emissions, is the name of the group. It's the group that's been tasked with trying to find some viable solutions to replace 100 low lead. You may remember there's a goal by 2030 for the lower 48 and 2032 for us here in Alaska to have a viable replacement for 100 low lead. You may notice that I've changed some of the words I use. I said viable instead of a direct drop-in replacement. Yeah, that's something else that came out of some conversations. We're no longer using direct replacement, drop-in replacement, those phrases, because it's been pretty much determined that we can't find one. There's going to be a viable replacement, and viable means that there would be limited modifications. It would be very close in performance, but it's not going to be exact. So we've kind of let the goal or our aspirations possibly slip just a little bit to a more realistic level. I still would like to see a direct replacement drop-in fuel. I'm not going to lie, I really would like to see that, but I'll admit the candidate fuels that are out there, while showing some promise, are not really showing great hope that they're going to be the same performance and capabilities as 100 low lead has been for us. But the executive committee for the Eagle Initiative, several members of that committee came to Alaska and were attending the Air Carriers Convention in Anchorage a couple of weeks ago. So there was great opportunities for conversation there. I had wonderful conversations with most of those people on that team, talking about specific issues that I have that we need to get addressed in order for you, our membership, to be able to safely and confidently use a replacement fuel. And they heard those things, they listened to them, they scratched their head a little bit, and then you could see the light bulb turn on. They actually understood what I was talking about because, to their credit and to the thanks of the Air Carriers Association and some of their members, they got the Eagle Executive Committee out off of the road system. They took them out to Bethel and to St. Mary's and allowed them to see what it takes to get to those locations, first of all. They also saw what it takes to operate in those conditions and some of the infrastructure that's involved. They came back from that trip with eyes wide open. They understood more of what we've been talking about for several years now, and then they were able to actually understand why it's such a big deal and why we're making so much noise here in Alaska when it comes to long-term storage, when we talk about extreme weather conditions, when we talk about engines that have to have that higher octane fuel and just simply cannot do with lower octane. They see that. They know that now. They understand that, and they have promised and committed to take that back to Washington, D.C. and bring that up as part of the process. So I have hope that now that they've seen it with their own eyes, they've heard it from our mouth directly, we've been face-to-face sharing these things, that now they have a deeper and better understanding, and I've appreciated their willingness to do that and to hear what we've had to say and take it to heart. So I do appreciate and want to say thank you to them for coming up here. It's not easy to do that in February, but to their credit, they did. So thank you for that. Some other things I want to talk about before we run out of time, because I try to keep this without running too long here. An update on the Anchorage airspace proposal. We continue to have meetings, the ad hoc committee, that's who I mean when I say we. This is the process of going through and reviewing the FAA's proposal, giving them some feedback before they go public with it. So once again, you have not missed out on a chance to comment. You have not missed seeing the proposal. It is not to the point yet to be a public proposal. So you haven't missed anything. Don't worry. I will make sure to let you know for sure when it is time for you to voice your opinion and give your feedback. We're not there yet. The ad hoc committee, of which I am a co-chair with Alex Moss, who is with Alaska DOT and Anchorage International Airport. We are the co-chairs of that committee. There's a wide range that covers pretty much the entire spectrum of the users of that airspace. And I say pretty much because we're still trying to get some folks from the flight training community to give us some feedback, and they're working on that right now. So we're getting good feedback. We've offered some great opportunities for the FAA to go back and revise their proposal. And to their credit, they are listening. And to their credit, they are working through some of those possible changes that we have brought up. Now, what's this process look like and what's going to be the end result? Well, the committee will write a formal final report and submit it to the FAA with our recommendations. The FAA will then take that report, review it, and decide whether or not they want to implement any of our recommendations. There is no requirement to do that, but they have assured us, and based on their activities already, and based on a long history of friendship with these folks, I trust them when they tell me they're going to take our recommendations serious. So there's probably going to be some changes in the floors that are being proposed, maybe some boundaries that will change from what they're proposing. But here's the gist of what's happening. You probably remember where this has all come from. I've been digging through my notes, and it's been almost 10 years already since this first came up as a topic of discussion, where there was a need for an ILS to the north-south runway at Elmendorf. A lot of things have happened since that need was expressed. They've shaved down a huge hill to the north of the runway. They've lengthened the runway 16 at J-Bear, and they are starting to work through that process of actually installing an ILS there. But before they can actually use it, before it can be commissioned, the airspace has to be reevaluated, because they need to protect some of that airspace. That glide slope coming in to that ILS for that runway needs to be protected, and so that's going to mean a modification to the airspace. And the FAA has taken this opportunity to clean up some of the other problems with the Anchorage airspace, and that has caused some problems. I will say, and I've been on record saying this, that this proposal from an IFR perspective is a masterpiece. It's a work of art, actually, to be honest with you, how they've gone in and designed this and the flows to work with the standard arrivals and standard departures for international airport, how they're going to recover the fifth generation fighters when there's a heavy push of the 747s coming from Asia all at the same time. They've got that stuff figured out. However, it may be at the expense of the, what I'll say, non-participating VFR general aviation traffic. Now, let me be a little bit more specific what I mean when I say non-participating. If you fly in and out of Lake Hood or Merrill Field and do not get a squawk code and scoot out underneath the Class Charlie, and maybe you get a Part 93 deviation sometimes you don't, you would be considered a non-participating VFR target, essentially, when it comes to radar. And if you would like to participate in the Class Charlie airspace, your life will be so much easier. You will be given a clearance. You'll be able to fly at a much safer altitude crossing Cook Inlet. You'll get traffic call-outs as you come and go and exit the airspace or enter into the Anchorage Bowl. But the problem is, a lot of people don't want to do that for various reasons. Some of them are very legitimate. Some of them, however, like I don't want to talk on the radio, not a legitimate reason to not participate. I'm sorry, it's just not. When we're talking about the amount of traffic in such a confined area, you need to get over not wanting to use the radio. And that's something you can deal with your friends or with a flight instructor to help you work through that process. Some folks are not equipped to operate inside or above the Class Charlie airspace. And that's because you don't have a transponder or ADS-B out. Now you have to have ADS-B out. Now some people don't even have a transponder, so their options for equipage are much more expensive than it would be with an add-on for ADS-B equipage. So these are the things that are going to be problematic for people when this airspace is modified, because it's going to be modified, folks. No doubt about that. To what extent and to what level and in what areas, that is still up for debate and for comment, which hasn't started at this point. So again, you haven't missed anything, but these are the things I'm looking at when I'm reviewing the airspace, trying to figure out how do we accommodate the non-participating VFR traffic as they enter and exit the Anchorage Bowl. Part 93 airspace is going to go away as a part of this. Now, what does that mean? That means the Part 93 deviation for altitudes, that's going to go away. But the VFR procedures will stay. They're going to change from what they currently are right now, but they're going to change from what they're doing at this point for what they look like, because the airspace is going to change. So pay attention to that when that process comes up. So last thing, just want to encourage you to do the General Aviation Survey. That's live, so go to aviationsurvey.org, and I'll put the link in the description below so you can go and participate in that survey. So we're up against a 20-minute limit, so I'm going to shut things down for you this month. And again, look forward to seeing folks at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering in May. And if you haven't already bought your raffle tickets, go to alaskaairmen.org and buy those so you can win that great airplane.